This is Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and we're going to kick things off today by looking at the Slav Defense. And so we're going to look at a couple of problematic lines in the Slav Defense and how to deal with them. And so the Slav Defense, the Schallopp Variation in particular. And so we're going to kick things off by responding to d4 here with d5, c6. So this is a Slav Defense with c6. And so after knight c3 and knight f6, this is very, very flexible stuff. And after knight f3, in the Schallopp variation, you're going to be bringing your bishop out to f5. However, against this setup by white, it's really, it might not be your best option to just go ahead and play bishop f5. And so the problem is that white has played a very fast and very flexible setup, and he can now take advantage of the move order if you play bishop f5 by capturing on d5, and if pawn takes here, he can play queen to b3. And so the problem with queen to b3 is he's going to be creating two threats at the same time. And so the big problem for black is he doesn't really have a good way to defend the pawn on b7. If he plays b6, the natural way, he's going to be really exposing himself to some problems along this diagonal for the rest of the game. And so that's really just something you want to avoid. It's just not going to it's not going to work out good for you. Sometimes white can even move ahead and try to sacrifice a pawn just to open up this diagonal. It's that serious. Maybe even playing knight e5, say e6 and e4 directly, and well, it's not a very pleasant position for black. So b6 is off the table. So how else can we defend this pawn here? Moving the bishop back to c8, I mean, yeah, it works, but you're giving away a free move there by moving your bishop backwards, so it's not a very good option either. And so one of the best options I've been able to uncover is by playing queen to b6. Knight takes d5. And so white is able to take this pawn because after queen takes b3, he has knight takes f6 check. And so now I think black should recapture away from the center, unfortunately, but he needs to open the bishop up. And in this position, I did a good deal of research on this line, trying to play bishop f5 with the Schallopp variation anyway. If you're a beginner or intermediate player and you don't want to spend too much time on openings, you'd like to just stick with the same set. If you want to play the Schallopp variation of the Slav Defense, you want to play it. And here's a way to make it work. I'm not crazy about black's position here. A lot of research I was doing, looking at 23, 24, 2500 games, whatnot, I really saw that black in these positions was trying out a lot of different gambit lines as far as sacrificing the pawn, and I just it didn't really seem very promising, these gambit lines. It seemed like black was just losing a pawn and not getting any compensation. So I started looking for ways to keep the material balance, especially important for beginner and intermediate players. Maintaining material balance is going to make things a lot easier on you than sacrificing a pawn for some type of vague initiative. And so here with bishop c2, black is not going to sack the pawn at all. He's going to get it right back. And so the deal is, if knight to d2, we can just follow that with bishop b4. And we are basically going to jump on white's position. We're going to get our money back. We're going to get our pawn back on b3. And, let's take a look. That's not white's best continuation, I think, knight to d2. It doesn't really make sense as far as white just kind of moves another piece backwards, and black gets to develop a piece. So that's not a very good, not a very good trade for white. So I think the best for white is probably either e3 or maybe bishop to f4. Bishop f2 is okay as well. Let's look at e3. Black gets the pawn back. White can continue aggressively, probably knight to d7, a little conservative. Knight to c6 could be a little exposed. And I think in this position, black is okay. I'm not crazy about black's position. However, I think if he plays well, if he plays accurately, he's going to be just fine here. It's going to be an equal game. Even though white has a protected passed pawn on d4, it's very difficult to activate that. Black can slow it down with moves like f5, and he can also blockade that pawn. So I think in this position, I did some good digging here. I didn't see any forced, big advantages for white. I think white just has kind of a small advantage. For the rest of the game, maybe we could see either bishop d6 or b4. Either way, And let's take a look. Let's say bishop d6, bishop d2. And I think your best move is going to be something either king to e7. I think king e7 or possibly a6. a6 not really making a threat. However, after king e7 we are, and I think black is going to be able to regroup here and get his piece over to help out on the queen side. I think he's got a perfectly playable game. So that's one way that black, if you're really crazy about the Schallopp variation and you want to stick to your guns and you don't want to speculatively sacrifice a pawn, that's one way to maintain the material balance against this flexible move order by white where he's not playing e3 or g3 early on. Instead he plays to develop the knights here. Another way to play here for black is to change your strategy. And so it's not the best thing in the world, if you got to study a lot of openings. It's better to get a narrow opening set and then focus the rest of your time as a beginner and intermediate player on positional strategy, endgame technique, things like that. Very, very important. But having at least a decent opening set is good. So let's look. Bishop f5 is what we just looked at, and pawn takes. You can also take with a knight here, but this isn't a very good line. I've never been very impressed with this. It seems like black it just is giving up his entire stake in the center. Maybe just queen to b3 by white, g3, eventually playing e4. It just seems too easy for white. So, the first line that we looked at was if pawn takes and queen to b3, and black playing queen b6. Now let's look at a different way to play this. So instead of bringing the bishop out to f5 here, and going with the normal Schallopp variation, what I'm going to recommend is to play a6. And so this is called the Chameleon Variation of the Slav Defense, and that's because you can really change your colors, do whatever you want from this a6 move. You can change into any opening, and associated with the Slav Defense. And so there's a couple choices by white. You're also directly really threatening to take the pawn on c4. If white messes around, he plays like bishop f4, just take the pawn. And you're completely set to play b5 and keep that extra pawn. That's another advantage of playing the early a6. Really, it's just an incredibly flexible move. If e3, let's say after a6, maybe e3. Now with bishop f5, if queen to b3, you're just fine. I think you can probably just play b5 here. You shouldn't have a problem. You got a good position here is the name of the game. I mean, even queen to c7, maybe not going to work. You might be losing a pawn here, so I think you probably want to go ahead with b5. Also, against queen b3, it could be a little more effective not to play b5 so early. And this is something I learned when I was studying this. Just kind of hit me again now. With the queen on b3, if you play b5 after a couple of exchanges, the move a4 is really going to hurt you. Because now you're going to have to give up a big initiative on the queen side. White is going to be a lot better. He's just going to have an easy target to attack right there on a6. He's already got a lot of pressure on it. So instead of playing b5 here, and really, instead of playing bishop to f5, maybe you want to play something like g6. This really goes well with the Chameleon Variation. You are going to be changing up your position quite a bit, but you really got to protect yourself against this queen b3 move. It really can create a lot of problems for you. And so one thing also, white can play queen b3 immediately. This is very popular. And for example, Kamsky of the U.S. right now, he likes to play g6, and he goes into a fianchetto variation of the Chameleon Variation, and he's had great success with this opening. He hits the fianchetto early and plays a very, very just an incredibly solid and flexible game. So that's going to do it for this video. Basically, I just want to clarify a few things in the Schallopp Variation of the Slav Defense. You can continue playing this with the early bishop f5 against this flexible setup by white, but it's pretty sketchy, and I'm not so happy with it against this early queen b3 move. I'm not so excited about the black's position, so I think playing a move like a6 is a very useful waiting move against e3. Without the queen on b3, maybe we can go b5. And so now, for example, if a4, we can push b4. And I think if white is playing queen to b3, instead of playing b5, it's going to be better to go ahead and fiend shadow the bishop and get your king out of there. And so I hope this kind of helps you out with playing the Schallopp variation of the Slav Defense and avoiding some of these trickier lines where white can really get a nice initiative on the queen side early on. So Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net.